All right, we're all done. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for attending another episode of investment and financing strategies for real estate investors. Welcome to the Wing Yi from the Yi Real Estate Network. And once again, our guest speaker is Richard Advani from Supreme Lending, our Yi Real Estate Network primary investment loan advisor. So thank you for attending, Richard. I know how busy you are. You and your staff have serviced so many investors all over the country to buy turnkey investment properties mostly. And on behalf of my network, I'm sure you have other real estate network, investment clubs as well that are feeding you referrals for many, many years. So I'm happy for you. So keep you busy. All right. So today, the topic, we're going to go over 6 questions. All right. So without further ado, my first question is, if an investor wants to finance a duplex or fourplex, let me give you an example. Someone wants to buy a fourplex in Texas or Florida, and the fourplex is located is around anywhere from 600,000 to 800,000. And the rent is good. The numbers make sense. It's a positive cash flow situation, like a 5% or 6% cap rate. So you and I understand it's a cash flow situation. So how does an investor qualify? Let's say an investor makes like 100,000 per year W-2 income, fully qualified. We can make that assumption, or maybe even $80,000 a year, or maybe even slightly less. Assuming the investor meet the loan to value ratio and the debt to income ratio as well, how does a lender, you as a lender, would look at how can someone making 60, 70, 80 grand as an investor can able to do 25% down financing to buy a fourplex for 600, 800,000? How do you underwrite the loan?
Absolutely. Thanks, Ewing. And so I'll answer it from even more of a subjective question is, how do you qualify someone that makes 20,000 or 40,000 a year, that may be a spouse, or maybe, making a limited income? So the first thing that we look at as investors is someone's debt to income ratio. The debt to income ratio is what determines how much or how many as it relates to buying rental properties. And the way we calculate the debt to income ratio is pretty straightforward. And it's important to note that more than credit, more than having millions of dollars in the bank, and also more than the amount that you owe, we are interested in that debt to income ratio. And it's basically a ratio between your monthly income and your monthly debts. And the things that we consider and kind of count towards your monthly debts are your housing expense, whether you rent or own, and any monthly payments, not balances, but any monthly payments of debt showing on your credit report. So car loans, credit cards, student loans. Generally, those are the types of items we're going to include in your debt to income ratio. And depending on the product that you pick, typically we're limited at about 50% of that gross monthly income in terms of your debt to income ratio. So the important thing to note there is that you need to make roughly double of your monthly debts in terms of income. Now, what happens if you don't have much in terms of monthly debt? And we run into this a lot because oftentimes there may be a higher earning spouse versus the other spouse. And, let's take a scenario I had just yesterday where spouse A made $300,000 a year, right? A lot of income. And spouse B, part-time, out of the goodness of her heart, she was a special eds teacher, and she made about $35,000 a year. Now, the way that this couple structured their initial acquisition of their primary home, as well as auto loans and all the other investments, they were generally done under the primary wage earner's name, in this case, the husband. So the wife, who only made $40,000 a year and who was joint on title on the primary home, but not on the loan, all of a sudden was able to qualify because she had no debt under her name. all we had to hit her debt to income ratio with was the taxes and insurance payments on that primary home, which were about $1,000 a month. Now, here we have an individual who makes $40,000 a year. Her housing expense, once again, just because she's on title, was only $1,000 a month. So her debt to income ratio entering into the transaction already was very low. It was about 25%. And because of our ability to use projected rental income on the property that someone's trying to buy, even if it's not rented out, her debt to income ratio wasn't really increasing with each acquisition. It was staying the same or going down, which effectively means if we can qualify for someone, even with the low income for that first property, we can generally run them up to that 10 property Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac limit as quick as they're comfortable moving, which is awesome because, you know, in that example, the spouse was making $40,000 a year, but we can even take in that example, what she needed to make to qualify was probably closer to $22,000 a year, you know, $24,000 a year. And we could have helped her qualify to buy, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 rentals. So we get asked very often or told very often that, you know, hey, I'm self-employed or I'm retired or I don't make a lot of money, so I probably can't buy real estate. Well, that's not quite true. The important thing is to keep your debts low. You know, if you have low monthly debt, if you're currently living at home with your parents, that's great because guess what? You have no housing expense. And that means even if you do have a $700 car payment, and even if then you're only making $50,000 a year, you can effectively invest in real estate. In fact, you'd be very well qualified making $50,000 a year, living at home with no real overhead to come and buy investment real estate. You'd be super qualified because your debt to income ratio would be pretty negligible going into that first transaction. So yeah, debt to income ratios, it's actually a pretty straightforward calculation. If you're self-employed, people may interpret your debt to income ratio a little differently. Whereas, you know, that's where my team and I expertise really comes into play because we're used to corporate structure as well as used to self-employed people and complicated transactions. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. A little long-winded there.
Yeah, great information, Richard. I mean, of course, you and I've been around for a long time in the investment arena. I do understand your answer from a high level, but a lot of potential investors, especially newbies, they do not fully understand. So once again, you're providing tremendous value in terms of investor education with respect to qualification, which is critical component to leverage your the loan to buy multiple properties. So let me kind of see if I understand what you're saying. So whether someone making $400,000 W-2 income or someone making $40,000 of annual income, as long as their monthly debt are no higher than typically 50% debt to income, yeah, preferably lower, of course, lower the better, lower than 50%, that's great. So I'm going to go back to the case study which I presented to you. So what I hear you saying is that even for this one spouse or making 40 grand, if that spouse have very little debt, whereby he or she have under 50% debt to income ratio, you need to tell me that individual with a low income, assuming they have the down payment available, assuming they have a very good credit score, 700 or above, whatever, they could potentially buy a fourplex for $600,000 to $800,000, as long as that fourplex, or each unit, each door, if you will, have the potential historical rental income that could provide, that can pay the mortgage on that fourplex unit. So for example, let's use, for the sake of simplicity, let's say this fourplex is 400,000. So if each unit rents for 1,000, okay, right, 1%, rent to value ratio. So I mean, so the lender gonna qualify the fourplex based on the rental income minus the projected debt obligations for the investor.
Correct.
As long as the fourplex qualify as a cash flow property, that individual, whether they're making 40 grand a year or $400,000 a year, will qualify to buy that fourplex.
Correct. Well, generally we take 75% of the projected rent to allow for vacancy and maintenance. So 75% of projected rents or of actual rents on a new acquisition.
Yeah, how does an underwriter or you as a loan agent calculate the 75%? I mean, what kind of a data you need to make this purchase work?
So yeah, the way we determine the market rent, I think is what you're asking, is, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac allow what's called a rent survey. So basically when the appraiser goes out to determine the valuation of the property, he also completes an additional product that checks comparable rent in the area, and they come up with the approximate market rent. And the lender, us in this example, is able to take 75% of that projected rent towards qualifying, towards offsetting the principal, interest, and tax payment of the property.
Yeah, I got you. So a $600,000 fourplex, I mean, the investor potentially going to be paying like $4,000 in monthly mortgage, taxes, insurance, and property management fee, the $4,000. But the underwriter, when they do the loan, when you're underwriting the loan, the underwriter and you will project the projected rental income for all the 4 units. If the rental income grows monthly, will more than offset the investor's total debt obligation, in this case $4,000, that's fine. I mean, so the investor, like I said, going over the previous example, what it making, the investor making 40 grand of W-2 salary or 400,000, as long as the DTI, debt to income ratio, is lower than 50%, they qualify, right? I mean, it's
exactly.
Good.
And I mean, the interesting thing is, someone who makes $400,000 a year may be worse qualified than someone that makes $150,000 a year, because that person that makes $400,000 a year has a lot more debt, and their debt to income ratio is, higher versus someone who makes $150,000 that doesn't have a lot of debt. So it's interesting. It's not just based on how much you make. A lot of it's, the relation of your income versus debts and your ability to manage finances.
Yeah. So would you agree, especially for over the years you've been a loan agent, that you find that very many investors, or especially the newbies, they do not necessarily understand the debt to income ratio, DTI, how critical that component is to the overall qualification. Am I right?
Yeah, most of them don't. A lot of people get stuck up on, how much money they have in the bank, or how little they may owe on something. And it's interesting because we don't take into account that whether you owe $50,000 or $60,000 on your car loan. We don't care. We care more in terms of what the monthly payment is on that car loan, because that determines your debt to income ratio. But, you could have $1 million in the bank and get turned down for $100,000 loan because we can't post Dodd-Frank, we can't, even if we wanted to, say, hey, logically, this person presents a low risk because they have $1 million in the bank. They're trying to borrow 100 grand. Well, if they still don't meet the debt to income ratio requirement, we still can't give them that loan. And, those are more federal regulations than, people just being foolish in my industry.
Yeah, great information. Wow, even I'm learning something. So my follow-up question. So let's say that investor, that same case study, close escrow on this fourplex, okay? Everything fine, it cash flow. Then, because this investor have more money to buy more property, the second and third and fourth property this investor is going to buy, whether it's a single family home rental or duplex or fourplex, does not matter, as long as the property cash flow, as long as the potential projected rent will cover the debt obligation for the investor, they can continue to buy second, third, fourth property, as long, and the DTI, the debt to income ratio, if I understand you correctly, that will not really is not going to change. I mean, you know,
Correct.
so it's not like, you know, a lot of people, like I said, a lot of investors simply doesn't understand. They think just because they're making 60 grand or 80 grand per year, they can't qualify to buy multiple properties, whether it's a $300,000 duplex or $800,000 fourplex and all that scenario. But in reality, they could do that as long as the numbers of DTI, as long as the underwriter will project the 75%, they take 75% of the rent and offset by your total debt obligation. If the number is a wash, if you will, wash, then it's okay. I mean, they can do the loan, right?
That's correct.
Wow, that's powerful information because I have to believe that many people does not understand this unique scenario. So thank you for this clarification. So wow, we already spent almost 15 minutes just to address one question. So I think we only have time for another, maybe one more question. Then we'll come back for another time to have you, because I want to restrict this podcast to no more than 25 minutes. So.
Well, I think these days people's attention spans are only that long anyway, so probably a good thing.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, I have a recent scenario. Okay, I consulted several clients recently. I'm gonna give you another question, and then we'll conclude in another 10 minutes. A situation where some of my investors are they are semi-retired or retire. They only have either they have no W-2 income, or they have very part-time W-2 income, but their house is paid off. Okay, their principal home is paid off, the primary home, and they're drawing on some retirement income. They are drawing like $40,000 to $50,000 on tax return. They show a dividend income and IRA income. They are withdrawing the income. Is passive income, is not W-2. They are drawing on their retirement income to the tune of $40,000 to $50,000 a year, if you think about it, because they have a large IRA portfolio. They are kind of retired, whatever, and perhaps some of them have a part-time income. They're making like $20,000 a year in W-2 income. I know when we talk about full DOC loan these days, lending is much harder to qualify these days, especially in light of the 2008 financial crisis. Lending has become very stricter. So the scenario I just provided to you, does this person qualify for a full DOC loan as an investor to finance 20 to 25% down payment on investment loans?
Yeah, they absolutely should, because once again, it comes really down to debt to income ratio. And if that person, as you said in that example, had a primary home that is paid off, didn't have much of any other debt, was only drawing $40,000 to $50,000 a year, they would absolutely qualify, and it would be easy for them to qualify. Where people run into issues, though, is although that scenario happens quite often for the clients that you and I work with, a good 50% of them still have a $3,000 to $4,000 monthly mortgage, even though they owe $500,000 on their $2 million home in the Bay Area. Their overhead's still low because they probably got a 15-year fix because they wanted to pay it off. Well, now that 15-year fix at $300,000 to $400,000 is inhibiting them from qualifying, because now they need $100,000 a year to qualify. So in your example, yeah, we absolutely still can qualify someone who has a paid off primary home, who has low monthly debt, who has an income, even if it's a small amount of income. But also we can qualify people that don't meet any of those buckets either, because up until now we've been talking about conventional financing, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. What I do also have access to is more the non-traditional, non-QM financing, where if someone's going to put 30% down and the property is making good cash flow, we don't need any income documentation. Now, you're not going to get the same rates, in the conventional rates. They're going to be 1.5% or so higher than conventional rates. But leverage and finance in most scenarios is better than no leverage. And most of the time, the deal will still pencil out at, a 4.5% to 5.5% interest rate. not as good as, of course, a 3.5% rate, but it still will pencil out. So there are options for people that don't fit in any of the traditional buckets. However, you have to put more down and take a slightly higher interest rate.
Actually, I was about to ask you the very same question. You kind of are ahead of me. I know we only got 5 minutes left, so let me clarify what you just said. So what you're saying, if I understand you correctly, if someone does not have sufficient W-2 income to qualify for whatever reason, under the conventional way, the full doc loan, if you will, they can, as long as they have the enough cash, they can do
and good credit.
Yeah, and good credit, of course, more than 700 FICO score or whatever. But they can no longer qualify for a Fannie Mae, the best lending guideline. I understand. So your portfolio, are you saying that you have portfolio lender within your toolbox, if you will, to qualify for somebody who does not have any W-2 income? If they can do 30% down payment, whatever, and then is a 30-year amortized fixed rate, like 4.5%, 5%, did you say? What are the terms for those non-full doc buyers?
Got it. Yeah, absolutely. So generally those terms are 30% down. You have to have a good credit score, 720 plus. And the terms are 30-year fixed, typically anywhere between, high 4s to high 5s in terms of interest rates on a 30-year fix. But yeah, we do have access to those portfolio lenders that will do that type of product. And, we do quite a few of them.
As a matter of fact, I have several clients already I've been talking to. I wasn't sure. So you clarify, you answered a lot of the questions. In fact, one of my clients, she, okay, let me give you a real example. She want to buy one of our property in Florida, like the $200,000 new construction, $200,000 property in Florida, in Central Florida, projected rent like $1,650, right? I mean, typical, good new construction, single family home rental. If she could do the non-qualifying loan with 30% down and the rates, whatever rates, and she, so I know I'm going to ask you, provide a unofficial answer. Is this probably going to cash flow based on this scenario?
Oh yeah, it would absolutely still cash flow.
Wow, that's a very interesting. So the 30-year amortized fix around, did you say high 5s? I mean, or mid 5%, 30% down. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, it's still definitely cash flow.
Wow. So no W-2. What about a tax return? Does she have to present the last 2 years of federal tax return?
No, they will not on that program. There'll be no income documentation at all.
Wow, that is but this is a portfolio lender, is not a Fannie Mae conventional lending, which is the best, obviously, but still doable given the good cash flow market that I'm promoting in Florida and Texas, especially, and the good rental income, good cash flow. So for those of you out there, if you do not have a real job W-2 income, if you have at least 30% down payment, if that person have a good credit score, at least 700, whatever. So does that really matter about the DTI, the debt to income ratio, or not taken into consideration in this particular case? Is that true?
Correct. No debt to income ratio requirements or even taken into account.
Yeah, so no doc, no tax return, but you do need to do the 30% down. You do need to run the credit score. That's basically it. Or there's no doc, investor qualifying loans, or whether it's a single family homes to fourplex or any other limitation. What kind of property type someone have to can buy? Anything like that?
No, there's no limitation. Just 1 to 4 unit condos are okay as well, townhomes. So it's a pretty aggressive program.
Wow. Is this program going to be around for a while, even after the COVID situation? I mean, is it
it's survived through COVID thus far. It's tough to say, whether how long it's going to be around or if it's going to be around in the future. My hunch is it'll still be around for a time to come.
Okay, I tell you what, wow, how time flies right now. We've almost done 30 minutes of it, I think. So I think that's it for one day. It's a lot to digest, even though I only asked you like a mere 2 questions. You take almost 20 out of 30 minutes, but very good content, very good valuable information. Another way for you to educate our network investors. So really appreciate Richard. So thank you for your time, and we'll schedule another podcast to talk about some other great topics.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.